So there are two people. They're still finishing the talks. So it might take a while for people to come in. Okay, let's see. It should be transmitting. All right, we're all here. So we're live. We're on YouTube. And so I'll just present everybody. To my left, to my right, is Hernandes. So Hernandes is a professor at Unicamp and also the artist of Image H, which is exposed in our gallery for the meeting. And Hernandes works a lot with microscopy. He's the head of Infabic, which is a microscope facility. And you can see that there's a lot of influence. There's a lot of transition between microscopy and painting. So we'll hear more about that. Octavio, who's below, he was my professor at UFRJ. And then
Unicamp too.
No, but now Unicamp, I wasn't at Unicamp. I wasn't even in university when you were in Unicamp. That was a long time ago. So I met Otávio when he was a professor at Instituto de Biofísica Carlos Chagas Filho. And then he went to Universidade Estácio de Sá, né? for become the medical school. They established the medical school there. And now, but he was always a musician. I think even before becoming academic, he was a musician and played in the orchestra at Rio de Janeiro. And then he went back to his first love to music after he retired. So now he has his own studio, and you could hear his music at Caminhantes do Deserto and also in Happy Blastomeres, which brings me to Tomoko, who is a researcher at University of Oxford. So Tomoko did her graduate school at Columbia University, Developmental Biology and Genetics, right, department. And she's a researcher also in developmental biology, University of Oxford, and she was the one who generated the beautiful images in Happy Blastomeres. So the reason we have the vernissage in this very non-traditional way is because, well, we can't have a real one. But this is a good way for people to talk to the artists, and they might be coming in soon because they're still finishing the sessions. There's still questions going on in the sessions. But I thought you would like to meet each other because you guys have something in common. You both research and art. Tomoko's going to say no, but I'm going to say yes. Yes, you do.
I'm just get help. Yeah.
Well, when you look at your images and you think of what movies to make or what movies are good for publication, you have to think about these things too, like Hernandes said.
Yeah.
So I interviewed Hernandes before and asked him about the duality between science and art, and I think there's a lot of common. That's why we have this session for the meeting, because we want to show there's a lot of stuff in common between the two. So I was wondering if any of you could start. Otávio, I think I visited his studio, and I used to go daily almost to his electrophysiology lab. And the two of them look very much the same. They're actually some of the same furniture that were in the old lab now are in the studio. So maybe Otávio could start telling us a little bit about, was it a very hard transition? Was it smooth? Did you see mirror aspects in both?
No, actually, no. I have been thinking about this for a long time. And I always had this idea that when I retire, I'm not going to continue in the university. I'm going to reinvent myself in something that it was always present in my life, which is music. So after my retirement, I went back to studying. I had to study a lot of things again in music. And then I had the idea of setting up this studio. But of course, the studio is just like a laboratory. Always and comparing to electrophysiology, it's not many things are different. We have frequency generators, we have stimulators, we have all kinds of electronic equipment, but they work in the frequency range which you can hear. So it's not microwave or infrared. We are always within the wavelength of music. That's the only difference. They produce audible sounds, but the equipment is very much alike. So I never had any problems in fixing. You're here in this sort of area of virtual music. It has been going on since the 90s. When we were together at Columbia in 95, I was going already through a few people, musicians that trying to find out what was going on, what was new. And so when I came back, I began my interest in this area. And that's what happened. I bought the office space and learned how to build a studio. And of course, acoustics is part of biophysics. So it's nothing much new. So that's how it all began. But I went back to studying music first, or re-studying a lot of things that I had done in my youth. So and now I have this studio, which I consider a laboratory.
It is very much like your laboratory, because I remember in his electrophysiology setup, he had everything within the reach of his chair. I think I was mestrando. I was doing my master's back then at Fernando Mel, and we'll go to Otavio's lab, and then you didn't have to even get up from the chair because everything was so well designed that you just have to stay there and then swivel between the microscope and the oscilloscope, and everything was perfect. And so his studio is exactly like that. I'm pretty sure that most studios are not like that.
Well, the central table, it's pretty much the same, because most people have a console from which you control everything. Nowadays, a computer, so you have big 2, 3, 4 monitors, and but everything is around you, like the cockpit of an airplane. So you're there working. It makes it easier.
Yeah, but you bring a point that I think is interesting, because Hernandez brought that up in his interview too. Because sometimes people think that artists just do it out of their heads. And one thing I ask Hernandez is like, well, what about technique and colors? Because technique is very important in, and I'm sure Tomoko agrees with me, technique is very important in lab experiments. You have to make sure you have the right technique, you perform it correctly to get the desired results. And Hernandez also said that he's always studying to improve his painting. So I don't know, Hernandez, would you like to share a bit of how it is to study for painting? Because that'll be different from music. How do you pursue that?
Mostly I see videos on YouTube.
Works.
Very rich source of information. Good information, I guess. And there is something that I didn't mention in my interview, is that mixing colors is a very important thing. So in painting, mixing colors, I mean. Did you get there?
I think we need your huge microphone, Hernandez.
Oh, sorry. I can take it. Let me try.
Otavio, you can help out Hernandez. He's got some sound problems ever since the beginning of the meeting, and he got this huge microphone, and he still can't get it to work.
What if I get closer?
We want the huge microphone.
It's my son, so I have to go to his bedroom and take it. And bottle. So give me a minute.
For his symposium, he had this thing that was this size, Otavio. You have to see it. It was like, he looked like he was going to broadcasting radio. It was very impressive. But because his computer sound's not very good.
But he has it. He has a microphone.
Apparently his son has it, and he borrowed it when his son was sleeping. So now this might take a little while because his son, I think, is awake now.
Okay.
I'm not sure how easy to get it from his son, but he because his sound level is too low, and then he had this very impressive microphone coming out. So how are you doing, Tomoko? What time is it now there?
It's almost 7 p.m.
Okay.
It's dark outside. It's dark.
Yes, you guys are in winter. We get that. It doesn't get dark that early here.
And I get to see, and I'm getting to see Tomoko. And
I know. Hello. Finally.
I don't think she has seen myself. I've seen Tomoko and Shankar briefly during the event. The Oxford event, the online
science festival, the online
that
science
was it.
festival.
You never met.
You were both sitting in a sofa, and very briefly the camera went by, and I said, "There's Tomoko," but then it disappeared. So that was the only time I saw you.
You've never met personally. I mean, you've never met.
So. No, I don't think so.
I haven't met Shankar.
I met Shankar. We had lunch together.
Last SBBC, in the last cell biology meeting, Otavio met Shankar, but you never met Tomoko. Even so, how?
I wasn't invited. I wasn't invited.
Sorry, we don't have much funds for art.
Yeah. Okay, you have to come.
I will. When we can fly again.
But how did you collaborate on the piece if you never even
lots of emails?
How did you exchange ideas?
So what happened? Would you like
we've exchanged many emails.
Yeah. So what happened was I had this public engagement grant from Wellcome Trust. I'm not an art person. I just generate data, and then so I'm still working with this artist, dancer, and choreographer, and she was looking for someone who could produce or create music with her for her dance production. And Irene introduced me to Octavio because he's a scientist who creates music. He's a musician who's also a scientist, and vice versa. I don't know which way you want to prefer to call yourself. And then for Anand, the artist, it was important to have someone who can understand both art and science. And I thought Octavio would be great because my field of science, developmental biology, and then that has a lot of cell movements and internal workings. And I thought Octavio coming from the electrophysiology and cell biology background would be great in bringing in the nuances of expressing that part of the science. And then unfortunately, the Anand and Octavio collaboration didn't work out. But during the many exchange of emails, and I had thought I wanted to see how he thought about data, and then I sent a bunch of papers. For Octavio received a bunch of development papers and whatever that we had with pretty pictures, movies,
the papers
to him. And then he kindly actually compiled data to make a proper movie, a sequence that makes sense. And then he actually made music to accompany it. And then my only request was make it and then he did make music whimsical in the way that I didn't imagine coming from like my data. So that was really
So
nice.
did that, so did the music when you heard the music for the first time combined with the images, did that make you look at your data differently?
It did. I'm like, to me, it was like a labor, right? Like it was long night, long hours, like looking at like, shifting embryos, and it was like a lot of hand drawing, and then it was just like labor and then like pain. And then, I didn't think anything fun or like nice would come out of it. But then, it was really nice the way he treated it. And then I was like, wow, it actually made me smile.
So who made up the title, Happy Blastomeres?
Octavio.
Good guy, Octavio. They do look happy.
Yeah.
Something, Irene.
Sorry?
You collaborated in this title. At some point in time in our correspondence, you said something about happy or something like that. And since we were talking about blastomeres, why not Happy Blastomere?
Oh,
It
it
was
does make
something like
sense.
that. Yeah, it was something like that.
Well, we have comments here from the organizers from the meeting. Well, it makes sense because blastomeres are the beginning of life, so it's going somewhere. It's happy. It does sound very happy.
And they seem very happy, jumping around.
When they divide, they're really active.
Yeah.
Was that drift, Tomoko? Was that supposed to happen?
No,
Or was that
I corrected the drift, and that was also the painful part. Because to make the segmentation, it took hours and hours. Basically, like one embryo would take about 3 weeks to correct and then annotate, and that's what it's a whole manual segmentation. So it's not happy or active or that sort of thing doesn't come into my mind.
Oh, so the blastomeres were happy, but you were.
So like, it was really nice to be reminded at the beginning of life. It's the beginning of the energy coming together, and then like start new cycle. It was really nice to be reminded of that. Yeah.
But there was something that Elan just told me too, that when you're processing images or you're painting, you have in your mind, also I think when you compose, in your mind, you hold an ideal. I mean, I'm going to correct this until it becomes whatever matches in my head. So in a way, you're also doing that, Tomoko. I think when you're, although segmentation is it's an objective process, but when you pick the pictures you want to publish, you do have an aesthetic sense. It can't be just any.
It has to be pretty. I didn't have that much choice. I didn't have that much choice because the images are so grainy. Because we need to make the confocal 3D stack confocal of that stage embryo. You need to keep everything so low, and everything was so grainy. So we had to pick the one that looked the prettiest. It's a product of love, right? So you want to present the best.
See, there you go. So Blastomere is, there's a question from the audience. I think that might be for Hernandez because Tomoko doesn't create the images. She actually captures scientific data. So I think that's directed to Hernandez.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Show Otavio your microphone.
Right here.
Wow.
It's a big one. Okay, as Irene mentioned, there is a perfect image in my head, and there is something that I want to show up. And then during the painting, there is an expectation that what I show up in my hands is just very close, as close as that thing in my mind. So what I feel is expectation. So that's the answer.
But it's internal, right? There's an internal expectation.
Oh, I'm not so happy as the Bastomere as when I paint.
Are you happier after you're done painting?
Yeah, I'm happier when I'm painting. I'm not so happy as the Blastomir I mentioned. So, but I'm happy, certainly happy.
Better off than the Blasphemous. So let's see if there's any from the audience. Okay, Gisele. Gisele, does that answer your question, or do you have more? Okay, wait a bit. He said, but while she answers, and then you said something you did. You said you wanted to add to the interview content that you didn't say before, and then you had to get the
I
microphone.
see. I see. There is one part of painting which is mixing paints. So it's a complex methodology. It's something that you can do or you cannot do, because people need to understand how mixing colors together give rise to other colors, and how you can get like shades and different colors using combinations. And this is a very funny, perhaps, how should I say? Let's say funny part of painting. So you experience like you make mistakes and have to go back and start over again, and trying to get the correct shade you want for a green or for a red or for a blue. It's an interesting part of the painting that doesn't show up when you show your painting.
So that's actually interesting, because I'm guessing that the same thing happens with music. When Otavio mixes instruments and sounds, if it doesn't come out right, I'm pretty sure you have to go back and do it all over again. So would that be something similar, you think, Otavio?
Exactly was your question.
So and then this talks about mixing paints. So in the gallery he had exposition of mostly green paint. He was in the green phase, right? So he had mostly, but also you can tell the different shades of green. So do you? Oh, there's another question from an audience. Let me just finish this question. So when you mix sounds and instruments, would that be a creative process similar to painting, but only with sound? Because we in cell biology we're very visual people. So
it's very much, because you have I always start from like a scratch copy of everything, and jotting down ideas, how I would like this and that and this. And if it doesn't come out the way you're thinking, that's the advantage of having virtual instruments, that you can always, sometimes you imagine, it has a lot to do with timbre, how the instruments will sound together. And sometimes they don't work very well because of some of the things that you wrote, the music that you wrote. So you either change the music or you change the instruments. So it's a balance. In Tomoko's case, I settled that we absolutely had to have Shankar there. We had to have a xylophone. And I wanted to begin with 8 notes, since we had 8 Blastomirs. You have to put your imagination to work. We're gonna put together here a little history story. So I'm gonna work with 8 notes, and I want them to be very individualized. So the xylophone is a very nice instrument, because pip 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 pip, you can individualize the notes, and the listener will understand what you're talking, what you mean to say. And from those 8 notes, and then I've started with the other instruments. Which one am I going to use to combine with this and that? It took some time, just 2 minutes, 1 minute something of music, but it took a long time. First, I had to understand the papers. She sent me 4 papers.
4 papers, Tomoko.
papers.
That's like a grad student.
And I am a
Grad
physiologist.
school course.
I am a physiologist, but you know, we I mean have the obligation to read the paper. At least you have to understand what the author is talking about, even if it is an embryology paper. After so many years, so I read them all, thought they were very nice, and then she had in some of the papers she had video clips that came along with the papers. Actually, it was the first time I saw that. I haven't published a paper for many years, so I don't know now that you can put a video clip in the paper. So I took all the video clips of all the papers, put them all together, and tried to make a story for myself of what she was talking about. And then reduced down to 3 or 4 video clips to make something that would make sense to her. You know, you just not have to make a musical sense, but make some sense embryologically speaking. And I was very afraid that I wasn't going to succeed, but then she liked it. And I said, well, Tomoko liked it, so I just have to finish. I sent you a first copy in the beginning, and then the first copy, her reaction was very nice. So I said, okay, I am in. Now I just have to finish the work, polish it up, and see what comes out.
So I have more questions from the audience. I think this is for all of you because I think all of you have different views on it. So this one, Patricia Gama. Do you think scientists should be more stimulated to arts, not only creating, but experiencing more art? Do you think that is so important to our brain in terms of plasticity, I think, in terms of different points of view of seeing things differently?
So I've collaborated with another digital artist over the summer, a disabled dancer and a digital artist, and then it was stimulating to see how they come together to work and create based on one of our paper. And then I'm also the original collaboration with Ananda. It all started the collaboration with Octavio, and so she was doing residency in our lab. The dancer was doing residency in our lab, which was truncated by the coronavirus. I think, we had a discussion amongst our lab and then lab members and then Anand, the dancer, about our thinking process and compared it. And then there was a very interesting process, a discussion. And then I think the Chris Graham, Professor Emeritus in zoology, that he was commenting how similar the dancer, the choreographer thinking about creating her art was to how we formulate our theory and then the go on experiment. The thinking processes, like you can make a parallel. So I think it's not a bad thing. I think it would be an interesting thing. It would be stimulating either way for us to get refreshed and then get new ideas and then get some rest, especially now.
There's another one from the audience also. Do you believe scientists, I think to all of you also, scientists that work with images, e.g. cell biologists, must have an artistic eye to capture good photos that correctly present the data? And then I think we talked about it just a little bit in the interview.
It's good if they have, but how can you ask them to have? So I see some of my colleagues don't have.
But they get published anyway.
You see in papers and in published papers when the micrographs don't match each other. So there is a need of some arts to set those micrograph panels and how they are put together, and even the choice of the micrograph. So I guess it's nice if they have, but we cannot oblige them to have. So
yeah, but we always I think even though if we don't like as non-artists and just reading papers, just by when a picture is really well placed or the image is well taken, it does make it so much easier to read. So I'm wondering maybe a little bit of art training would come in handy to increase the impact of your papers, because you have you have good data but you don't know how to show it to people. It's like somebody who writes badly. I mean, you have great data but you don't know how to write, or your presentations aren't so good. You might not make your point across as well as if you had better tools, visual tools or writing tools.
It might be not the correct interpretation, but it's more like convincing others that like you care, that show that you care, and then you show the best. Probably shouldn't be a best, the data, but to make it convincing, but to
at least frame the picture correctly, right? Don't have it, kind of glossy,
Yeah, it's important enough for you to make it right. Yeah.
it might be a graph. Sometimes you look at a graph and you say, "Oh, it's beautiful." Sometimes you look at a graph and say, "Oh, it's awful."
But it's not so much the graph, maybe not so much the data, but the way they made the graph.
Yeah.
So I think that
graphical abstracts are a very interesting thing. So you have to compact your ideas and results and the conclusions of your paper in a single figure. So it's very interesting to work on that thing. So
now sometimes there's some models in graphical abstract that make it worse. I've seen that too. So look at it. It's like, make it worse. So I think that should be an important point, especially like Patricia said. Cell biology is still a lot about images, and it's also developmental biology. Visual input is very important. Before we close, I think we'll have like 5 more minutes. There's another exposition and another exhibit in our gallery, which is Caminhantes do Deserto, which actually was a visual stimulus. I think Otávio knows the story better than I do. So it was a painting. So the painting's on the movie that inspired Savino, who's Fiocruz, to write a poetry, and then Otávio inspired the poetry, wrote the music. So that is sort of like a signaling pathway. You have the memory receptor, you have the intracellular, and then you have the nuclear transcription. Otávio, do you know a little bit more of the background of that work? Because Savino couldn't be here with us.
Sorry. Sorry. I don't have any water here now, so bear with me. Yeah, when you talk to me about this, I've worked with Savino before, in other ventures, more related to medical school, and he in immunology and me in physiology. So we've known each other, and I know a little bit of his character and what he likes and so forth. So he gave me his book, and the freedom to choose 2-3 poems, and which chose the Caminhantes do Deserto, which was the one I perceived the one he liked the most. And in his house, he also told, I've heard when I was there, we were drinking some wine and talking about the book. It was just before the lockdown, or 2 days before the lockdown. People are already wearing masks, and the environment was not very friendly. So, but I was there, and then he gave me the book, and he was listening to some music. And I of course, my ears sort of, and I noticed it was music from Africa, and they had African instruments playing. And one of the instruments, and I perceived it was the one that he liked very much, was the kora, which I described in the video. So I went around and found somebody in Oregon, in the United States, who was producing virtual chorus. This is another department, I mean, how you produce a virtual musical instruments. Basically, you play all the notes up and down, everything. It's very hard to do, and it's a long process. But the technology.
You mean like a virtual luthier? Virtual luthier. It's like
no, you play this guy, for instance, he built chorus and he had a school to teach people how to play. So he decided to sell some virtual chorus. Or you go to a studio and you can do this with any instrument. It's a very sophisticated process. It can be very simple. It can be very, not complicated, but very full of details and so forth. It depends on how much you want to pay. So he produced this virtual kora, which he just sat down, recorded all the notes, all the so-called articulations, everything the instrument can do. And then now you have software that will compile all these data and make it play, basically. And so I had one kora already, one virtual kora, so I got a second one, and I thought to myself, I'm gonna do something with the chorus. But this is also bears in the previous question that Tomoko was answering, that Savino is one guy that he can transitate between science and art. In other words, in Caminhantes do Deserto, goes very deep in some questions of the human nature. And these are not scientific problems. So this is the bag of art, where you can discuss things that are not. Eventually, it might be a scientific problem if the neurochemistry and all of very many other sciences will progress.
It's more of an abstract psychological situation.
But we might get at some point in time, in a few decades or so forth, states of mind that can be explained by science. But right now they cannot. So this is a typical thing that art can do. It will discuss problems that are not scientific problems. It cannot be approached by the scientific method. It won't go anywhere with this. It's very simplistic. If we had a panel here, we could debate this the whole afternoon. But anyway, Savino is a guy that he can go from one side to another. He will be talking about immunology, very technical paper, but he can also write Caminhantes do Deserto with travels to some other states of mind and things that are very, very peculiar to the human nature.
So with Tomoko, you had to read papers, and with Savino, you had to read the book.
No, I read the poem, and Tomoko also. Well, I understood the video, and I understood the paper, but then, in order to write the music, I had to forget it, because if I keep thinking about embryology and blastomeres, and it will not work. So I had to have a little travel by myself and go into some other stratosphere to be able to do that. And I imagined myself a few scenes that were compatible with the video clip. Otherwise, it won't work. And the same thing with Caminhantes. In reality, the music deals with three desert walkers. Desert walker is not really you cannot translate very well this, because these are not people walking in the desert. They are not loners. They are not, enfim, it's a very Portuguese thing that I have to think about how to translate that. I know why you, Irene, you didn't translate the title, because you might have had the same problem.
Exactly.
Anyway,
I didn't want to get into that. It was too hard.
It's a state of mind that many of us have felt before. It happened to me. It happened to him. It might have helped to many, especially those who work in science. You might have felt like a desert walker sometimes. And this is, so I imagine three caminhantes, three people. The two choras, each one is one person, and the cello is a third person. And then he goes with the poem. The three began very together. At some point in time in the poem, Alda says, well, at some point in time, they realize they are not alone. And then comes the cello solo, and the two choras play different things. So all the three walkers, they become individuals. This is all in my head. Of course, the rationalization came after the music. When you're doing, you don't know why you're doing that, but I know it's something that came to my mind. And as I read it, these people are walking along and feeling like they're walking in the desert, but then they realize they are not alone. There are others. And that's how the music goes. And the style of the music is something, it's very particular to each composer, but I like very much the music of the Pampa in our state, in the very southern states of Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. It's a very typical style of music. And Milonga has one of these styles, which is very much played in the pampas, in the fields. And the themes are always very nostalgic. They are always counting stories, a lost love, a horse that died. It's all very typical of this region of Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. And
lots of farm animals.
It is a type of music that has much more in common with that region of Rio Grande do Sul, Argentina, and Uruguay than with the rest of Brazil. It's very interesting. Many Brazilians don't know this, but I thought it would go very well with the poem. So that's how I said I'm gonna compose a milonga here. Of course, I moved the things around. It's not a typical milonga. It's something that looks like a milonga. It originally came from Spain. The habanera, the Spanish habanera, that the first settlers brought in, and it was changing, and it became what it is now, called the milonga. So that's how it went. But it was very nice to work with. Tomoko was one type of problem. Not problem, but one type of question. Very nice exercise on how we go about that. Savino was a different sort of thing, that he did his part of the thing. He went and he describes a situation very typical of the human nature. It's just a problem that everybody encounters, not a science problem. And how I would, and I sent to him the very first production. I called him and I sent through the WhatsApp, I sent a version, and he was all very emotional. And so then I said, okay, I managed to do it right. So if he liked it, he's the author. Yeah. If the author liked, and I was I was very pleased, and with Tomoko too, because the way she answered my email, I knew she had liked it, because she could have said, well, I don't like this kind of music, and let's do something else. So there were different kinds of situations where you have to create music.
So yeah, I think that does answer. There's a duality. So it's always good to have this interface. It's always good to have new stimuli. Unfortunately, I have to end the session because we have poster sessions soon. But even though it would be much nicer if we could all go to the, including Tomoko, because next time, Tomoko, I'll make an effort to invite you to Brazil and have pão de queijo and all these things that you like, and tapioca and pastel, all these things. But still, it was very nice that we could have this moment. And Otávio finally meets Tomoko, and now Otávio reminded me, yes, 2 professors from Unicamp who are artists. So thank you very much, guys. Well, come to the meeting when we have it in real meeting. I mean, presencial, insight meeting. So I hope you guys
Thank
can.
you, Irene.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good night, Tomoko.
Good night.
Bye, Irene.